Public opinion is very important in American politics. It's a measurement of what people think about government action, it's a measurement of how people feel about the direction of the country, and it's used by many different groups. Politicians use it to determine policy agendas, which pieces of legislation they're going to support, which ones they're going to oppose. Campaigns use it to determine the strength of their candidate, to determine the messages that they want to play, to determine what types of advertisements to run, and the media likes to use it to track different election outcomes and predict who's going to win certain contests. Now, if public opinion is so important, we need to make sure that we have a valid way of sampling public opinion. So that brings us to opinion polls. When you have a sample, you need to make sure that your sampling size is large enough to adequately represent the population that you are trying to determine their opinion on. In a country of 300 million people, we can adequately survey and get results from about 1,300 voters to get a pretty good picture of how a national election is going to turn out. And the reason for that is we use a random sample, where every voter that's eligible has an equal chance of being called. It's important, though, that when you use that sample and you look at who actually responded to your survey, that there are no internal biases built in. You don't want to underrepresent or overrepresent a population. If you are surveying for a national election and your polling sample shows a population of 90% white middle-class males, you are not going to get an accurate representation of the American electorate. Another problem that polls present is question bias. If your questions are loaded, you will not get an accurate read on public opinion. Now, if you just want to know who's going to be elected, you ask the simple question, in this race, who are you supporting? If you want to push public opinion and make this about changing minds, then you ask loaded questions and you provide information on candidates that you are not supporting. You present them in a negative light, and then you try to figure out if those messages work to move opinion. Now, one of the dangers of polls is that they provide information to us, but incomplete information. So media tends to use these polls as the driving force of their election coverage. And that brings us to horse race journalism. The media loves to focus on who's winning and who's losing in an election. In the 2012 presidential election, Barack Obama running against Mitt Romney, a lot of campaign focus has been spent on the general standing of the candidates in the polls relative to one another. This is at the sacrifice of substance and issues. In an election determined based upon the economy and issues that matter to people, the media has neglected their job of fleshing out campaign promises and pledges of the candidates, and instead has focused on polling objectives and which candidate is winning which state based on the latest round of polling numbers. This is one of the dangers of the media that they fall into when they become too infatuated with polls and public opinion surveys.